With me in the studio, the London-based journalist Nabila Ramdani, who covers North Africa, closely knows much about Algeria. Nabila, let me start with you first of all. Let's look at where this took place. A very remote part of the country. Again, we still don't know exactly how this has unfolded, and it is partly because of that. Just place us there for our listeners. What sort of area of the country is this like?
Well, the attack took place in the southeast part of the country, in a very remote part of the country, on the location of what is the biggest gas installation in Algeria. And there has been trouble in that part of the country in the past involving hostage-taking situations as well. Algeria is an extremely vast country, and its southern borders in particular are extremely porous, and the Algerian government has had difficulty controlling the borders. Having said that, attacks on oil and gas facilities in Algeria have been extremely rare, and the government, in spite of decades fighting Islamic militancy, has been quite capable of keeping that kind of attacks in check. And that's indeed what we have to bear in mind when we see the very robust approach of the Algerian government. We are talking about a facility worth a significant proportion of the GDP. It's a hugely important part of the Algerian economy, and there was no possibility that the Algerian government was going to let this facility become overrun by Al-Qaeda. And it has to be reminded that negotiations would have been possible indeed if we were dealing with an isolated compound somewhere, as it has indeed happened in the past in 2003. In fact, Mukhtar Ben Mukhtar, who is said to be behind this attack, was involved in a similar type of hostage-taking situation when 32 European nationals had been taken hostage and were released within 6 months. All of them were free.
David Ottaway, some governments expressing their concern about the lack of information that they were given. David Cameron said he would have liked to have been warned that this military assault was underway. What's the word from Washington?
Well, I haven't heard whether the Americans knew it was going to happen or not. I mean, it happened so quickly, I kind of doubt it. And I don't even, the way the U.S. government has been reacting, they haven't said how many Americans are involved. If they say some, they believe some have been or among the hostages, but they seem to have very scant information about exactly who was there, who's a hostage, who's alive, who's dead.
And that will be of some concern, presumably.
Well, I think the larger concern is where things are going because of what's happening in northern Mali. And, the Islamists inside Algeria had warned of taking any retaliation against Algeria if it did get involved in northern Mali. And both the Algerians and the Americans are kind of similar in their dithering about what to do there.
Yeah,
and we've had a very intense dialogue with Algeria. I've never seen so many visits by Hillary Clinton and the head of the African Command, General Ham, and about what to do there. And I think this is kind of provoking everybody to some kind of action.
Well, of course, action's already been taken in Mali, isn't it, Nabila Ramdani? The French forces are increasing their presence there. Most people seem to be drawing a direct or indirect link between what's been happening there and this hostage-taking in Algeria.
Absolutely, and not least of all because of the demands made by the terrorist organization behind this attack itself. It has very clearly demanded the French to hold the military operation in Mali, and even asked the Algerian government to stop its cooperation with the French, and also asked the Algerian authorities to release 100 Islamist militants from Algerian jails. And it's no coincidence that the attack should have happened on Algerian soil, given the history of the movement of Islamic militant groups going effectively from Algeria. There have been driven out by the Algerian authorities in the early 2000s at the end of the civil war, and they have relocated in northern Mali from where they have been carrying out similar attacks over many, many years.
David Oswald, we'll be hearing about the situation on the ground in northern Mali in a bit later on in the programme. But in terms of how this hostage crisis has played into what is happening there, President Hollande of France seems to be hoping and saying that this will make it clearer to countries like the United States about the need for firm action against the Islamists who have been moving south from their base in northern Mali. Do you think that's going to wash with the Americans? Do you think it will actually get more action, more involvement from the administration in Mali now?
Well, I think we're going to see very shortly. I mean, the Americans have been arguing we don't have any major interests in that part of the world. Well, in fact, the largest foreign oil company operating in Algeria is an American company. And they have facilities down in the central part of the desert and are as vulnerable to the kind of attacks that took place just now as anybody down in that area. And I think the Americans, the Obama administration, has been hiding behind various excuses for not doing anything there, and that this may force its hand.
Nabila Ramdani, you think from President Hollande's point of view, this terrible situation with the hostages has, in a sense, helped him politically?
I think his motivations were numerous in intervening in Mali, and I would argue that one of them was his flagging in popularity at home, and he's tried to build an international reputation as a proper statement by showing strength abroad. That's a classic behaviour of effectively
and in battle, yeah.
Indeed. And 75% of the French population were supportive of the intervention in Mali. But as we seeing the situation involved and the number of casualties increasing and perhaps bringing the very real threat on French soil, that might change the picture dramatically.
Do you think that what has happened then in Algeria is going to increase the support for François Hollande's actions in Mali?
Well, I think the initial support for France's intervention in Mali was there amongst the French population. If you think about it, the government presented it as a fight against very nasty elements who are indeed involved in sinister attacks against Westerners and are destabilizing a whole continent effectively. So it was presented as a very noble project and indeed a commendable thing to do. And 75% of the French population was supporting François Hollande. But I think that with the situation as it is evolving now, with the number of casualties rising and with the fact that the country is getting more and more involved and perhaps for longer than President Hollande thought initially, that might change the perception at home.
And will it change the perception abroad? Because, yes, we have hostages from various countries who've been affected now by what has happened in Algeria, the links being drawn between the two. But is there really an appetite in somewhere like Washington to get further involved, to give the kind of support that perhaps the French would like to see?
Well, I think what this crisis has very much brought to the fore is that this will have huge implications for the whole region. The war on terror aimed at fighting terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda or indeed Al-Qaeda-inspired groups has so far focused on countries like Afghanistan, Iraq or indeed Somalia, but with Western governments now drawn in the conflict because of the very serious hostage situation, then they are realizing that they are up against a formidable enemy who won't go away. Western lives are at stake. The terrorists who are behind this attack are very well aware of that, and it's playing in their hands. They are literally holding the world into ransom.
OK, Nabila Ramdani, thanks very much indeed.